Looking ahead to the back end of 2025 with some foresight and talking about the handful or more than a handful of players that we have that will be out of contract at the end of next season. We currently have 21 players who will be out of contract. Now, of course, we will get some of those nipped in the bud nice and early in the season, but we're going to go through them one by one and just see where they're at as far as their future lies in the black and white. A quick shout out before we start this video. This topic idea came from Blue Broad, Terry Degani, who runs the channel there. Talking about contracts in general is quite common, but just the format of what he's doing with this, I'm sort of stealing. I'm doing a 3-part series talking about players out of contract and suggesting what type of contract they could be offered moving forward. So let's get into it. So we'll start with Billy Frampton. He is currently has served the club for 3 years. He goes in as a non-free agent. So I think someone like Billy Frampton, best case scenario, he's granted a 1-year contract extension. He'd have to do some great things on the field and prove his worth and suggest to everyone that he can be that second key tall defender. He's fortunate in the sense that we haven't brought anyone into the club to do that instead of him. Charlie Dean's still a little bit too small. I think he's best suited for that third key tall defender, Charlie Dean. And Myercheck could play back, but do Collingwood end up, I guess, rolling the dice there? I'm not too sure. Bobby Hill has been a big one. He's served the club for 3 years now, goes into next year as a non-free agent. He is from Perth. Rumours have come out that clubs from West Coast and Fremantle are going to try their luck with someone like Bobby Hill, and it is a bit concerning when the new draft pick rule comes in for the trade window next year, where you can trade your current first round pick and 2 future firsts to get the player you want. I'm not saying Bobby Hill is worth a first rounder or 3 first rounders, but it definitely gives these teams a lot of flexibility to really force these players like Bobby Hill who are going out of contract to consider what's the best move for them. So I think he remains at Collingwood? By all reports, it sounds like he's going to commit to Collingwood. I hope that's something that's done early. We don't leave it for later in the year. We'll revisit that when we get to this point next year or in September. If I had to guess we'd have to sign Bobby on a 5, 6, 7-year deal really to reassure him that he has that job security, right? He's looking for job security, and if he's not going to get that in Melbourne, then he may as well go home to Perth, where he's probably got his family there. Yes, he has a family here now with his own 2 children and his partner, but it'll be an interesting one. Brady Maynard, moving on, served the club or has been serving the club for 11 years, has been a stalwart of the club. He makes up the Collingwood cloth, and he goes into next year as an unrestricted free agent. So we could potentially lose Brady Maynard for nothing if things go south. He was approached by North Melbourne, and that was quickly quelled and put to bed really early by Brazzy's management. Brazzy actually has his brother who does work for North Melbourne, so maybe that's how that started to generate and gain some traction, but it sounds like Braden's going to be a pie for life, so hopefully it ends up going that way. Brody Myercheck is going into his 9th year of service for the club next year, and he's currently a restricted free agent. So with Brody, it's an interesting one. He's been super consistent and reliable and finds himself on the field more often than not. The problem is he's now on the other end of 30. What is he, 31, 32? He couldn't stay on the field this year. He had hammy issues. He tore his pec, which was an unfortunate one. The contract offering will be contingent on, 1, if he can stay on the field. 2, where does his role lie in the team? With Membry in and McStay in and Mason Cox and Darcy Cameron, he's got to give us his 2 goals a game. He's going to give us his effort, relentless effort on the ground and willingness to put himself in positions that other players don't. And if he can show that extra trick up his sleeve with when it comes to being a defender that can support Darcy Moore, I think that will extend his life at AFL level. But he's been incredible for the club, and I would love nothing more for Brody Meek to remain at Collingwood. And for those who are wondering, Brody is a restricted free agent because he falls within the top 25% paid players at the club. So if a club was to bid or make an offer for Meek, a contract offer, then we can match that. And then if we choose to match that, then we force a trade between the two clubs. But I'm hoping we don't have to go that far. Next up, we have Charlie Dean, who has served the club for 4 years, hasn't really had a fair run at it up until this season that's just gone by, and he's a non-free agent, okay? We've been harsh on Charlie because we've had some difficult times as a team collectively, and his worst games were against some really good forwards. I just remember that game against Sam Darcy and the Bulldogs. Sam Darcy goes on to be one of the best key forwards coming up in the league for the Bulldogs, and he's destroying other teams. He nearly kicked 10 against one team this year. I can't quite remember who, but I think we can look back and give him a bit of leeway, cut him some slack because of the opposition he's come up against. The way we were defending and playing as a team wasn't acceptable, and it made players like Charlie Dean look bad. Heck, it even made Darcy Moore look like a terrible defender at times. So next year will be huge for him. Once again, the contract offering will largely depend on whether he can get games in and start to show some consistency. I don't think he'll be that second key tall defender role. I think he's better suited for the third key tall defender. But the problem is, Jeremy Howe does that to a T. Braden Maynard can do that if need be. But Charlie Dean definitely has more intercepting prowess, potential, versus Bruzzy. So when Jeremy Howe is all said and done, I think Charlie Dean can work his way into that position, and he can use 2025 as a stepping stone. The next one we have is Finlay McRae, who's been at the club for 5 years since that 2020 draft. Came along with Reef McInnes, Oliver Henry, Caleb Poulter, Liam McMahon, and Beau McCreary. And yeah, he's had his ups and downs, hasn't he? And it was said in the rumour mill that he was looking at other options, considering other clubs, but there was limited interest. So the fact that he had an extra year at Collingwood has probably spared him from being delisted. We say that, but then Markov and Ash Johnson, who had an extra year on their contract, got delisted, but fortunately, it wasn't Finlay, right? So he gets to stay on the AFL list, the primary list, and so he will get an opportunity to somehow crack into this midfield. And I think there's still space in there. I just don't know if Finlay is cut out for it. But hopefully, with more experienced players coming to the club and with less injury concerns and injury woes and injury clouds, whatever you want to call it, we'll get some good leadership and consistency at VFL level, which will hopefully fast track the development of these younger players who are knocking on the door at AFL level. The next one we have in the part 1 of this series is Harvey Harrison, who has served the club for 4 years. He's a non-free agent, nursing the ACL. It's super unfortunate to see to hear that had happened in the VFL. We'd rested him, I think it was for the Geelong game, and then a couple of weeks later he does his ACL extremely early in one of those VFL games. Had a really reliable run in the AFL, especially while we were dealing with a lot of nagging injuries. I think there was 2 games where he'd kicked 3 goals in each of them. One of them was against Essendon or Fremantle. So Fremantle was definitely one of them, but didn't collect the ball a whole lot, but I liked his cleanliness at ground level, and I liked that he could impact the scoreboard, all the while developing all these other traits and just being a younger player at AFL level. He's going to take some time, but he showed a lot of good signs, and I think when he was rested was the right time to pull him away from the AFL for a bit. Naturally, as a youngster, you might have a little purple patch when you begin your time at the top, but there's going to be that natural fatigue that typically you would require some respite, whether it's being rested, which he was genuinely rested. He didn't play VFL, and then come back into the VFL, play with an aura, because you can play at AFL level. You go back down to the twos and you show, hey, this is too easy for me. And it really is the mentality that shift when you go from VFL to AFL. You play extremely well for your role, and then you go back to the VFL. You've got to go in with that cockiness, that arrogance, without being delusional, and prove, hey, I don't belong here. I'm gonna play a half, and then you should just pull me because I'm gonna play in AFL next week. So that's how it should be, and that's how I hope it will be for Harvey Harrison. I think someone like Harvey Harrison will probably get, I would say, a 2 or 3 year extension by the time the season is done next year, and that 1 year buffer that could turn it into threes because of the ACL, and just grant him an extra year so we don't have to rush him. So that's part one for the out-of-contract players in 2025. Let me know what you think. We've gone through Billy Frampton, Bobby Hill, Braden Maynard, Brody Meek, Charlie Dean, Finlay, Harvey Harrison. That's 7. We still have 14 more players to get through, so this will be a 3-part series. Thanks for watching. Go Pies.